you're evaluating CDMO partners, what are some of the non-negotiable criteria you'd advise that they validate first? Thinking things like quality of track record, tech transfer capability, capacity, supply chain resiliency. What are some of those important things to take a look at before you even get to pricing?
Yeah, so there's a number of things, and a lot of it is depending on, I always say, kind of know thyself first. Where are you in the development landscape with your program? The early stage, mid stage? Do you think you have a blockbuster? Is it a rare disease type product? Kind of knowing all those things. And the non-negotiables are going to be, equipment matchup. Done some work here in our own facility. Maybe it's benchtop. Maybe it's into phase 1. You have just a little bit of a GMP operation in your facility.
Hello, and welcome to Pharma Sessions, a place for pharmaceutical leaders to come and learn from each other. I'm your host, Jonathan Kaskey. Technology and market trends are bringing change at an ever-accelerating rate, and no person, team, or company can afford to be left behind. Here, we dive into the strategies and tactics that our guests use to tackle these challenges and create new opportunities, and how you can do the same in your own organization.
This episode of Pharma Sessions is sponsored by Exunt, makers of the X1 reporting platform.
On today's episode of Pharma Sessions, I'm thrilled to welcome Frank Sorce, Chief Commercial Officer at UPM Pharmaceuticals and a seasoned commercial leader with deep experience across pharma manufacturing, business development, and strategic partnerships. I thought this could be a really cool conversation in that Frank has spent his career helping biopharma companies navigate decisions around development and manufacturing, which is important to any organization, right? So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about selecting the right CDMO, structuring long-term partnerships, and how to maintain a focus on both quality, reliability, while balancing that with price, which of course comes up with all of these discussions. All right. With that, welcome to the show, Frank.
Jonathan, great to be here. Really excited for this conversation.
Absolutely.
Good to see you again.
Yeah. So we're recording this on Wednesday, February 25th. There's about 2 feet of snow outside of my window. How's your back? You do a lot of shoveling over the last couple of days?
Yeah, I was on the snowblower for about 3 hours on Monday. I've got 2 neighbors that just don't seem to be able to do their own driveways, in addition to my driveway. So I did my good deed for the year.
That's good. Yeah, where I live, there's a lot of retirees, and I did mine, and I helped my neighbor shovel a path to his car and get his path out. But after that was like 4 hours. I'm like, you know what? I feel like that's all I got in me.
Yeah, the vibrations in my hands were just about all I can take at that point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks for joining, and let's just dive right in. So you've seen CDMO relationships from both sides of the table. Do you want to maybe start by sharing a little bit about your background, and then we'll ask some questions about your experience here?
Yeah, sure. So I was calculating some things. So I'm in my 37th year here of pharma business. I started right out of school with Merck Sharp and Dohme. Spent about 8 years in the Merck organization. Got my master's in marketing through their education support program. And after that stint of 8 years or so, I moved on into the sort of the contract sales business with, at that time, was a very early Syneos for a couple of years and a very early IQVIA, which were under different names at that time.
Sure.
And we supported large pharma in putting boots on the ground for them, sort of supplementing sales forces. And one of those clients was Reliant Pharmaceuticals. And I ended up joining them directly here in the Northeast as the regional business director. And we started that company, launched it, and then eventually sold it to Glaxo in the mid-2000s. And just took a little time off. And then I joined UPM Pharmaceuticals for my first tour of duty as an individual contributor in business development. And I also managed the marketing function right from day one. So I spent 12 years with UPM, individual contributor, eventually became VP of BD and marketing. They had a reorganization around 2019, and I moved on and I worked at Synergy Pharma, which is a high-powered CMC, medical writing, regulatory consulting firm. based in Framingham. And I started their BD operation in 2021. And I was enticed to come back to UPM the sort of end of 2024 and started my second tour of duty last March 2025. So
Wow.
I've seen a lot across the industry.
So you're a pharma lifer.
Yeah, I am.
Both sides of the fence.
That's right.
That's great. So with all of that history, I'm sure you have a lot of experience. It sounds like starting in marketing, right, and then moving over to manufacturing and CMC consulting, and back to CDMO. When a pharma, because most of my listeners are at pharma companies, when a pharma company first begins the CDMO selection process, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions they tend to have about how that decision should be made?
I think some misconceptions are we can do this now remotely. We can go online. We can look at websites. We can see ads in journals. We can get corporate decks, and we can do a lot of that vetting, from 30,000 feet above. Mm-hmm. And I think COVID, a lot of people did virtual tours and they said, hey, we did okay. We made a selection and it's working out for us. But you still got to get to the sites.
Yeah. And why is that?
Yeah. Because you can only observe so much from a remote location. But just pulling into the parking lot of a CDMO, you'll start to make judgment on this organization. Is the grass cut? Is the security booth in good shape? Is the front door clean? Is the mulch kept where it's supposed to be? You start to make a judgment as soon as you get on the premises, on the property. And right through to the meeting room they put you in, through the tour, the meeting of people, all those intangibles are important to the selection. And of course, do they have the right equipment? Is the place clean? Is there, all those things that you kind of take for granted, but those are all obviously very important in your decision.
So you're saying attention to detail in the small things is a good indicator that carries through to, the important parts of manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't take care of the small things, how are they going to take care of the big things? Mm-hmm. Is it as simple as, is there soap in the soap dispenser when I go in the men's room? Right? Those little details about the organization will help you in your decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm smiling because maybe this is too much information. Maybe not. Yeah. If I go to a restaurant and I go to the bathroom and the bathroom's dirty, I'm like, let's get out of here. Yeah, right? Like I do not want this.
Exactly right.
And it totally makes sense, right? Because you need a clean facility where every last detail of the operational manual is followed to a T, because it has to be. So what are some of let's say, again, you're for that pharma company, you're evaluating CDMO partners. What are some of the non-negotiable criteria you'd advise that they validate first? Thinking things like quality of track record, tech transfer capability, capacity, supply chain resiliency. What are some of those important things to take a look at before you even get to pricing?
There's a number of things, and a lot of it is depending on, I always say, kind of know thyself first. Where are you in the development landscape with your program?
Yep.
The early stage, mid stage. Do you think you have a blockbuster? Is it a rare disease type product? Kind of knowing all those things. And the non-negotiables are going to be, equipment matchup. Done some work here in our own facility. Maybe it's benchtop. Maybe it's into phase 1. You have just a little bit of a GMP operation in your facility. Now I'm going to move. I want to make sure that the equipment we've been working on is a match for the equipment you're going to be working. Right? I don't want to change, manufacturer of the equipment or the mechanism of which it performs its function. I really want to make sure I'm dealing with like for like. It may not be an exact match, but does the technology match up? Then I want to look at your inspection record. Where were you last inspected by? What are those health authorities? What do those inspections say about your facility? Did you pass? Did you get a 483? I've got to have kind of a clean track record from a regulatory standpoint. And then I'm evaluating, how are you responding to my inquiry? How quickly are you getting back to me? Mm-hmm. How arduous is your CDA process? If I can't get the time of day when I'm approaching you, or what are you going to do when we sign a contract? Right now, I'm bonded to you contractually.
Right. Now, for years.
Yes. For years. Exactly. Right. I mean, you're not buying a batch, you're buying a relationship. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a long-term, hopefully good relationship for both sides. So, I've got to have that sense that I'm important, because if I'm not important today, I'm not going to be important tomorrow.
I 100% agree. And things like responsiveness, and just, not that I don't know how you all are structured here. It's when I'm talking to people, I know that I'm not going to be ultimately working with the salesperson usually, but I want to at least meet the team of who I'm working with, right? Sure. And make sure that if I'm thinking this is going to be a multi-year relationship, this is going to be somebody who I trust, who I can think will have my best interest at heart. And I think getting back to your first point, you kind of have to do that face to face. It's not that different from hiring employees, honestly, right? We do so much virtually, but I found we just need to meet somebody in order to really get a sense of them.
I will, in the consulting world, it was very common, to say, listen, we're going to need support for this particular program. And they'd say, I want to meet the consultants. I want to spend an hour with them one-on-one. Yeah. And you should bring that same level of diligence to the CDMO space. Who's my project manager? Mm-hmm. Can I go in a conference room one-on-one and talk to them?
Yep.
See what their experience is, see have they worked on this kind of program before, and, really get that, like you say, it's an interview, because it's a huge decision for the organization.
So along those lines, and you would essentially, I think what you were getting at when you were saying, hey, if I'm not going to get treated well before I sign a contract, what's it going to look like afterwards? It's sort of, how do you separate a sales story from an operational reality? Right. So what evidence should these sponsors be looking for to confirm that a site can actually execute, beyond audits that you pass your slide deck?
Sure. This is, these are through conversations, and you may get some documentation. We deal in the solid oral world. So someone comes and says, listen, I've got this concept. We want a modified release version of this particular molecule. What have you done before? Can you give me 3 examples of how you worked with a compound that was immediate release forever, and you modified that release rate and gave it sort of an advantage and extended its life cycle, 5 more years, and we're going to benefit from that. Give me a concrete example of that. And if they're vague about it, there's a red flag there.
Yeah.
It should be very specific. We took it in, we performed these experiments, we scaled it this way, we used this equipment, here was the outcome, they eventually got an approval, whatever that sort of case study is on that particular program. It's you want to say we've done it, not we can do it. And those are 2 different things.
And is that what you find, when people I'm sure you're in competitive situations all the time, and some people select you and some people don't, right? But for the ones when they do select you, is that sort of the reason? Is that trust building, or what is kind of the reason that you get selected?
Yeah. So there's, it's a multi-factor decision. So is the equipment right? Can we grow within this organization? Can you scale? Take us beyond phase 1 or 2. do you have that experience with this particular modality? Have you worked on solid oral and taken this kind of a product forward with these parameters that we're giving you? And then, of course, your quality system, right? How is your quality team? How do they interact with operations? How will they interact with us? And can I check some references?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, those are the, I guess, steps you got to take in your selection.
And where does capacity fit into all of this? Because I'm sure there's always pressure in a manufacturing business that, the ownership wants to see more sales coming in, but then you ultimately need to be able to deliver on your commitment. So what do you think are some red flags that a pharma should be looking for, that a CDMO may be either overcommitted or struggling operationally, even if they look strong on paper?
Yeah, I think that you're probably going to get that sense if it's very difficult to move to next steps in the negotiation. Like, it took me a month to get a proposal. What's going on there? It took me, I can't get in the facility to do my visit. QA audits are 6 months out. All of those are telling me these guys are maxed out. Right? You don't want a ghost town when you go there, but you don't want a situation where, bins are flying back and forth and, it looks like chaos in the facility. And, you want a brisk sense of movement, but not too much. But all of those things up front will tell you, hey, something's wrong here. They're just like, I'm not going to get a slot.
Yeah.
Even if we consummate this relationship, I'll never get the slots I need.
Yeah.
From a manufacturing standpoint.
All right, we'll shift gears here to a little bit of where you think this industry is headed. So maybe let's start to talk about, I guess, pricing and an alternative model. So what's your take on risk sharing or dynamic pricing models in CMO deals? Can you describe what that even is? And then,
Sure.
when they create real realignment, when they become a trap for either side.
Yeah. So that is a buzz term right now, is dynamic pricing. And, it's some organizations, and I think this is.
Can you define what it is before getting into
it? It's going beyond fee for service, right? Traditionally we'd say a bat's going to cost you $50,000, stability time points 3,500, a development report is 7,000, and you got a Chinese menu of everything, and then it's $500,000, and that's what you pay. And, with organizations, especially small clinical, total virtual companies, they can't raise the money they had been raising that in the past. The last probably 3 years has been really tight in raising money, in whatever fashion you're trying to do it. So they're on limited budgets.
Yep.
So they'll say, if we can meet these time frames, let's say you can get me in the clinic in 3 months versus 6 months, I'll give you a 25% bonus. So you'd be 75% cheaper, 25% cheaper on your price, but there's a kicker that would be worth it to you. So those are kind of scenarios that people are, talking about right now.
And what's your take on those? Are they effective, or is it like an overcomplication?
I think they can be really effective for both sides if they're well thought out. Because if I normally get $500,000 for this program, but if it's successful, I have an opportunity to make $550,000. That's another 10% that I normally would not have gotten if I just was a fee-for-service model. Now, certain organizations, if the program isn't successful, or they have an adverse reaction that's just so severe they have to stop the program, you could be out a few dollars as well.
Yeah,
but it's a matter of, you have to attract a number of clients to be in your portfolio so that have a vibrant pipeline moving forward.
Yeah, that seems like a really tricky spot to put a CDMO in because, I mean, trials fail all the time, right? And it's just, it's baked into the pharma model that only a certain percentage are going to make it out.
Right.
I'm not so sure that it's baked into the CDMO model that half of your or whatever percentage of your contracts are gonna fail out, right? So And I would bet you don't really have the medical science expertise on staff to try to make those decisions. Not that you even can, right? Like
you don't, and you never.
It seems
know.
like a huge risk.
It is a big risk, but if the market prevails in that direction, you have to deal with it. You can't stick your head in the sand and say it doesn't exist. You're gonna have to say, okay, how can we make this work?
Right.
And that's where you get to the negotiation table and you try to make a good deal for everybody.
Right. You're almost like a VC trying to create a little portfolio of companies so that if some of them fall out, you have some successes.
That's exactly right.
All right. So then trying to think of a way to ask this without getting super political, and these things are changing by the minute, right? But let's just say there's all these geopolitical, like manufacturing reshoring pressure, right? And then there's also risks that tariffs may be there one day, may not be there another day. Who knows? And who knows what it's going to be by the time this thing even comes out, right? So how much do you think? What are you seeing companies, like, how much are they factoring that into their decisions around where to manufacture, trade-offs between cost, speed, reliability, supply chain reliability, when they're choosing sites these days?
Yeah. I think it's definitely in the thought process, should we make this product in the U.S.? That's there. There were a number of opportunities that we looked at last year where big pharma got our pricing, looked at it and said, we're just going to leave it where it is right now and wait and see. Yeah. We think that we can do it. And even if we put the tariff in there, it's still less expensive for us to make it ourselves than to use a U.S. supplier. It's just not worth it because obviously they do it themselves, in a particular country where labor is less expensive than North America. They're going to have lower margins there. It's not going to be as expensive if they do it in the U.S. And when they factor in a 10% or 15% tariff, it just makes sense to just hold pat with what you're doing. Now there's another contingency that's sort of, for lack of a better term, maybe more patriotic. Like, listen, let's do this. Let's build a facility here. Let's move the product to the U.S. Let's let United States people work on products that they're actually going to consume, right? And then give them pride in making something, bring that whole, concept back. Listen.
Are you seeing that actually? Are you seeing that really happen?
I am. I am seeing folks that say, listen, let's do it here. Let's get the best price we can. And depending on the dosage form, you get a pretty competitive price right now. In the solid oral, there's a lot of capacity in the marketplace. If you're in a antibody drug conjugate, it might be tighter. If you're in a monoclonal, it might be tighter. But if you can get a competitive price and make it here, some people really want to do that.
And so that's really fascinating. I remember, this is one thing, I'm trying not to be overly cynical here, but one thing I remember from business school was a survey where they asked people, I think it was jeans, like how much extra would you pay if a pair of jeans was manufactured in the US? And people said all of these numbers, and then then they did an actual experiment to see how much people were really willing to pay for, and the answer was zero.
Different story, totally different story.
But it's good, right? If people are willing to put their money where their mouth is, right? And because I think that the smaller that delta gets, right, the easier it is to make that business case, right, to your leadership and increase manufacturing here.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about another topic, Frank. Sorry.
Sure.
Continuous manufacturing adoption versus traditional batch processes. Can you explain what this is and whether this is a trend that people should be paying attention to?
Yeah, and it's probably been the concept of continuous manufacturing has been talked about for like 15 years. I've heard it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the big pharma companies would only speak to a CDMO if you had this technology, versus the batch. The concept, and this is my understanding of it, we've never done that here at UPM. So, I'm not an expert by any means, but it's just supposed to be a more efficient way of making a product and taking a little bit of risk out of, if you make one big batch and it fails, you lose the whole thing.
Yep.
Right. And you may have a very expensive active ingredient and now you're out that money. And now you're going to fight on who's going to pay for it. Whose fault was it? The finger pointing starts, the legalities come in versus a continuous process where you can stop it. Okay, got an issue. We only lose a little bit of product or a little bit of drug product. And then it continues. And it's also a little bit more efficient where you're not maybe moving room to room. You do your blending here, you do your milling right next to it, right? You do your sizing, and now you do your encapsulation or compression, and it's right in not one little room, but a bigger room, but it's all contained there versus moving it to different parts of the facility where there's some risk, obviously, if you do that. So I haven't seen a ton of CDMOs doing that or offering that. And that's just from my vantage point.
Yeah, this whole conversation is so interesting to me because I spend most of my time talking to commercial people and medical people, right? Yeah. Where it's a bit, I mean, we're talking about data all day long, but it's removed from the actual concept sometimes of like, well, somebody's got to get all this stuff into an actual pill that people can get into their bodies. And for me, it seems like magic because one of my like strongest college memories in an academic setting is trying to complete organic chemistry labs and just failing over and over to the point where I was like, I'm following the directions. I feel like, like Harry Potter in potions class. Like I just can't get the thing to work. And I'm staying late. The TAs are getting like annoyed that they have to say, and I'm just like not being able to synthesize these things. So it really is amazing that you all can do this at scale, at consistency, where somebody can go into, CVS at the end of the day, get something and not have to think twice before they put it in their mouth. So it really is, it's amazing to me.
Yes. Myself as well. When I started on the sponsor side, in sales and marketing, you didn't even think about how it was made. You're like, what was the inactive ingredients or what the stuff, you just said, hey, doc, take this once a day and your blood pressure goes down, and it costs $1 a day versus $2 for the competitor. And then when I got into UPM in 2007, my head was spinning about how smart these people are.
Yeah.
They are brilliant people. And it also, when someone says, why does it cost so much? Why do these products cost so much? If you were in the bowels of a manufacturing facility, a development operation, and you saw the work that was being done, how many sleeves were rolled up, and the intelligence of these people, you may think a little bit more about that statement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's fascinating. I mean, it really is it's important work because it just can't go wrong. And that's different than a lot of jobs, right?
Right. That's right.
All right. So let's wrap up with just a couple closing questions here, Frank. This has been super interesting for me. But looking back across your career, what's one lesson about CDMO selection that pharma leaders can usually only learn after something goes wrong?
Yeah, I think the lesson is, defining success up front. Mm-hmm. What are you looking for in the partner? what are those non-negotiables that are really important to you, the selection team, and the folks that have to work with the CDMO on an ongoing basis. You need to define that all up front. And then you need to go out and vet those things and make sure all the boxes are checked that are important to you. And you have to go to the sites and see the people, meet the people. And in the end, you got to use your gut and say, I think all three of these can do it, but I just have a feeling XYZ CDMO is the right choice for us. And then, you could always defend that decision-making process if something goes wrong, and you'll sleep at night because you did your due diligence.
Yes, I love that. That's been my take to a number of kind of big decisions, where to work, various things. It's like, if I get bit by something that I wasn't expecting, I'm actually okay with that, right? Like,
right.
You do what you can, you figure out what you can. Yeah. It's like, you never want to go into something with a concern, and then that's the thing that gets you, and you're just like, I should have listened to myself.
I know,
right?
I absolutely knew it, and that you don't want to be kicking yourself down the road.
Yeah. All right. Well, awesome. Well, let's leave it there. So trust your instincts, do your due diligence, trust your instincts, go to the site, and you will end up with a happy and fruitful partnership with your CDMO of choice. And Frank, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure, Jonathan. Thank you.
This episode of Pharma Sessions is sponsored by Exunt, makers of the X1 reporting platform. And that's a wrap on today's episode of Pharma Sessions with me, Jonathan Kaskey. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe and share it with someone else in the pharma world who might need to hear it. For more on pharma trends, career growth, and business strategies, connect with me, Jonathan Kaskey, on LinkedIn. Until next time, thanks for listening.